The Boy from Adana, How Kıvanç Tatlıtuğ Traded Basketball Dreams for the Soul of Turkish Cinema. There is a specific kind of quiet that settles over Istanbul just before dawn. The Bosphorus turns the color of brushed slate, the city's ancient minarets pierce a lavender sky, and for a few brief hours the relentless roar of 20 million lives pauses. If you had walked down a cobblestone street in the historic neighborhood of Cihangir during one of those quiet mornings a few years ago, you might have spotted him. No entourage, no designer shades trying too hard to block the morning light. Just a tall man in a worn leather jacket, cradling a paper cup of dark coffee, staring out at the cargo ships gliding silently through the strait. To the rest of the world, he is Kıvanç Tatlıtuğ, the Brad Pitt of the Middle East, a global export of raw charisma, a fixture on billboards from Madrid to Buenos Aires, and an actor who commands screens with a single, devastating flicker of his blue-green eyes. But to the man himself, standing there in the chill of an Istanbul morning, he is still just a kid from Adana who never, ever thought he belonged on a stage. The basketball court that never was. Long before the cameras rolled, before the red carpets of Cannes, and before millions of fans held their breath watching his characters bleed, love, and lose on television screens worldwide, Kıvanç's life was measured in the squeak of sneakers on hardwood and the sharp sting of sweat. Growing up in Adana, in southern Turkey, in a large, hard-working family rooted in a bakery business, his dreams weren't cinematic. They were athletic. He lived and breathed basketball. He was relentless, tall, and possessed the fierce competitive drive of someone who wanted to prove he could take his game all the way to the top. Moving to Istanbul as a teenager wasn't about chasing fame, it was about chasing a professional contract. He played for prestigious Turkish clubs like Ulkerspor and Besiktas, his future mapped out in fast breaks, defensive stances, and locker room chatter. And then, in an instant, the map burned. A severe sports injury tore through his knee, shattering the cartilage and, with it, his professional athletic future. Imagine being 20 years old, invincible in your own mind, entire universes of possibility stretching out before you, and waking up to find that the one thing you defined yourself by has been violently ripped away. He didn't know what to do next. He felt lost, unmoored, and entirely invisible in a sprawling, unforgiving metropolis. The accident of a mother's eye. Sometimes, the trajectory of a human life pivots on something as small as a mother's intuition. Watching her son wander around the apartment, heavy with the quiet grief of a lost dream, his mother, Nurten Tatlıtuğ, did something that changed television history. She took several casual snapshots of him and secretly sent them to a modeling agency in Istanbul. When the agency called, Kıvanç was baffled. Modeling. It wasn't on his radar. But he was young, out of work, and needed to pay rent in a city that didn't care about a broken basketball knee. Within a remarkably short time, his face was everywhere. In 2002, he entered the Best Model of Turkey competition, won, and went on to win Best Model of the World in France. Suddenly, he was standing in front of Parisian flashbulbs, draped in high fashion, surrounded by glamour. By all accounts, he should have stayed there. It was lucrative, comfortable, and easy. Instead, he felt hollow. I was a mannequin, he would later reflect in rare, unguarded interviews. People looked at me, but nobody saw me. I realized that if this was all my life was going to be, I was wasting my time on this earth. Crossing the fire, the birth of an actor. When the legendary producer and writer İpek Bilgin and veteran directors first looked at the young model who wanted to transition into acting, they were skeptical. The Turkish television industry at the time was notorious for casting pretty faces who could stand on a mark and look pretty. Kıvanç could have easily coasted on that. His physical genetics were a cheat code. But he refused to take the easy road. He enrolled in intensive, grueling theater training at the Devlet Tiyatrosu State Theater. He spent years unlearning how to pose, how to rely on his looks, and instead learned how to use his voice, how to breathe through panic, and how to unearth raw, ugly human emotion. He discovered that beneath the exterior was a well of profound sensitivity, a capacity for empathy that could translate pain across language barriers without a single word being spoken. His breakout role came as Mehmet in Guma's Silver in 2005. The show didn't just become a domestic hit, it became a cultural phenomenon, particularly across the Middle East and North Africa, where tens of millions tuned in nightly. But true respect didn't arrive until he took on the role of Belal Hasnadar in Ask I Memnu Forbidden Love in 2008. Playing Belal wasn't about portraying a hero. It was about portraying a coward, a deeply flawed, fragile, handsome young man trapped by his own desires and the crushing weight of family expectations. Kivanch didn't play Belal to make the audience love him, he played him with such devastating vulnerability that viewers couldn't help but pity him, weep for him, and ultimately understand him. That performance broke the mold. It proved that a leading man could be complex, morally gray, and terrifyingly human. The price of greatness. As his fame ballooned into something astronomical, the pressure mounted exponentially. Every project became a high-wire act. Directors knew they could push him further than almost anyone else in the business. Look at Kuzi Guni, where he played Kuzi Tekinoglu, an ex-con with a heart of gold and a self-destructive streak. To prepare for the role, Kivanch underwent a brutal physical transformation, dropping massive amounts of weight through starvation diets and intense kickboxing training, letting his face hollow out and his knuckles scar until he literally embodied the bruised, battered soul of a man pushed to the margins of society. On set, he would stay in character for hours, cutting himself off from the crew, carrying the existential loneliness of the character into the dark Istanbul nights. Our look at Slebek or The Protector, or his staggering work in the drama Ale The Family. In every single role, there is a moment, usually right before a character breaks down or makes a devastating choice, where Kivanch stops acting entirely. You can see the gears turning behind his eyes. You can feel the quiet, vibrating weight of a man wrestling with his own history. Off-screen, his life underwent a parallel grounding. He married stylist Basak Dizer in 2016, finding a sanctuary away from the madness of the public eye. When they welcomed their son, Kurt Efe, friends noted a profound shift in him. The intense, brooding fire that defined his 20s and 30s mellowed into a deep, quiet gratitude. He bought land in rural areas, took up woodworking, learned to pilot boats, and embraced the slow, tactile reality of building things with his own hands, a quiet echo of the bakery of his childhood in Adana. The man in the mirror. Today, Kivanch Tatlıtuğ stands at the absolute pinnacle of his craft. He has broken records, won international awards, and paved the way for the global wave of Turkish storytelling that now reaches over 1 billion people worldwide. Yet, if you ask him about his legacy, he will likely look away, smile that familiar, slightly shy smile, and shrug it off. Because for Kivanch, the magic was never about the applause. It was never about the billboards lighting up the night sky in Taksim Square or the adoring crowds at international premieres. The magic happened in the dark corners of a rehearsal room, when a broken-down kid from Adana, whose basketball dreams had turned to dust, picked up the broken pieces of someone else's scripted life, breathed air into them, and reminded millions of strangers across the globe that no matter how isolated we feel in our pain, we are never truly alone. And as the sun finally crests the horizon over the Bosphorus, turning the water to gold, Kivanch finishes his coffee, turns